Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for showing up. I really, really appreciate it.
So we also have Roxanne Beckford Hoge, who is Mr. Adrin. So we'll hear a brief spiel from each of you, and then we'll have a discussion.
Spiel?
Excellent. No, spiel. It's the official term.
First and foremost, thank you to the Neighborhood Council for hosting this wonderful forum and the opportunity for us to hear each other out and have you ask us questions. Second, I am going to be joining the senator at the same Shabbat, so I'm going to have to leave at about 6:45. I'll stretch it till 6:50. So I'm going to try to keep the responses brief so that you can have more questions to ask. But just want to start out by saying a couple of pointers. If you look at where California is now versus where it was 40 years ago, we've made tremendous impact in the state. I know it's romantic to talk about how it used to be wonderful. But if you look at where everything is going, where the country is going, where globalization has taken us as a world, where trading has taken us, how job losses have impacted us, California is ahead of everywhere else because of its ability to innovate and contribute to the job market. So on the economic development end, we're actually doing pretty well. Where we're not doing well is that not as many people as should be enjoying and getting back into the workforce are having the opportunity to do so. Because we're going into a more retail service-oriented arena of work as opposed to manufacturing. And that's troubling to me because that can change over time. The next economic downturn is within 16 to 18 months out. And the minute it hits, a lot of these service-oriented jobs can be cut. That's what's of concern to me. So on that front, we've made strides, we've been going forward well, and we've made investments that quite frankly, for 20 years, we hadn't. We were the beacon of entertainment industry in this state. The fight was between the Bay Area and Los Angeles, Hollywood. And when we won that fight at the beginning of the last turn of the century, and Hearst lost, we started attracting people to come here from all over the world. But up until about 20 years ago, all we had was people coming to Hollywood trying to find new job opportunities, but they weren't necessarily. In fact, by 2013, we were making 0 of the blockbuster movies, the tentpole productions, in California. And yet no one was really addressing this issue. And we finally did. We actually addressed it with the first version in 2008, 2009, and then we continued building on that in 14, and now this past year we've increased we've continued the program into 2025. That's going to be bringing in over 300 million into tax credits for the film industry. And by the way, California's version is much different than most other states. We don't pay for the talent nor for the production. We pay for the below the line production portion, which is all of your neighbors, maybe some of you who are sitting here. So that's the Economic Development Fund. On the environmental front, we've been the beacon in the world. We've led the charge in setting standards and goals that a lot of other places have tried to model or emulate. And we've been doing that in a way also so that we can help create more jobs. You know, if you go from traditional source of electricity consumption to a renewable energy consumption, you're creating, that innovation is helping new jobs to be created. One day, when all our rooftops are solar, all of our residential homes are solar top, you're going to be putting people into work not only on the manufacturing end, but also on the installation end and on the maintenance end. So there's things, intricate details of these things that have a long-term impact, and yet that's only going to be one segment of development. There's going to be other things that are going to be preceded because technology is going forward at an immense rate. And I'll just touch upon housing and homelessness. I tended to disagree with some of the comments that were made here before. Homelessness, as we know it, has been growing and has been part of our country and our state, at least our state, let's focus just on our state, for the last 40 plus years. It's been hiding. That's all it's been doing. It's been hiding in corners where people don't look. It's been in vacant apartment buildings and buildings in downtown LA where no one was paying attention to. Now that a lot of these buildings are not vacant anymore and they're being utilized because there's a lot of growing of cannabis in a lot of these buildings taking place, and vacancy rates are now in fractions of a percentage. A lot of these people have been pushed out. It's not that it didn't exist. We weren't paying attention as a society. That was the main problem. We're finally making investments, and the investments aren't just necessarily housing. The investment has to be done in the service to be able to help people get off of the addictions and the challenges they have so that they end up recovering and becoming a contributing member of society. We don't have a safety net system in our country nor in our state. That's where the problem is. And we're trying to build that in a backwards way.
Somebody's leaning.
I don't know if that's a hint.
Okay, let's take a moment.
That was a nice hello.
So with that, again, thanks for having me here and look forward to the conversation.
Well, I like that cue. I always like lighting cues. I'm one of those people who moved to California 30 years ago. I'm in search of an entertainment business job.
Say your name.
I'm Roxanne, but I was leading up to it.
Okay.
I'm Roxanne Beckford Hoge, and I'm also running for state assembly. I want to thank the Studio City Neighborhood Council as well, because it has been, sadly, a dearth of opportunities for us up and down the ballot to see debates and to see people in action. And really, that's the only way. These ads and these mailers, we agree, are horrendous. And I've reached out to Adrin, and he was very gracious to write me back, because there have been a couple debates that you weren't able to make. And so I'm really glad that you're here tonight, even though you have to squeeze it in. And we're going to watch the clock. I'm a small business owner. I'm a mother of 4. He has 3 kids. We have a lot in common. So we both came to America at age 11. His 11 was a few years after mine. I'm older, but that's okay. And we both became US citizens. The good news about that is that neither of us are eligible to be president. So we will not, like most people who become dog catcher and immediately go, I know what's next, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. We're here. We're here, and we both agree that California is worth writing for. Adrin wrote me that in an email. We just disagree on how best to accomplish that. Adrin pointed out the things that he thinks are important. Why am I running? I'm not a career politician. I wasn't one of those kids who was in student council and couldn't wait for the 6th grade elections. I never was a staffer anywhere. I've always worked in the private sector. I'm running because I love California, and I love the Valley. And I have lived here in my adult, sort of grown life. We started in the Hollywood Hills, and then each time we had another child, we had to move further north to afford to live here. So I'm now in North Hollywood, which is great, but we've had to move a bunch of times. And what I find very sad right now is that California, which used to be this amazing, amazing place, that when you said to people, I'm from California, they were really sort of jealous. Now you say it and people go, It's a shame that we can double our net worth. We could double the size of our house by leaving. And too many people are making that choice. I don't know how many of you have friends or relatives or bosses or businesses that have left, but the numbers are sort of legion. And it's all the producers who are going. It's all the people who are currently having babies and families, because they realize you cannot make a life here. I have a son who's in college, because I'm old, and I told him that we're not going to subsidize his living after he gets out of school, with love, I said this. And so he and his friends are looking for other states that they can move to, because I don't know how a young person would be able to get an apartment. I mean, apartments on Oxnard Boulevard, which is lovely. I mean, I live near there. They start at $2,700 a month. And so those things are impossible. So why I'm running for assembly is because all the things that caused our problems here in California come from Sacramento. Adrin is a reasonable guy, he's a good guy, but you can't fight against the overwhelming numbers of people who are doing whack job crazy things.
Can you repeat that again, the first
you're
part?
You're a good guy, you're a American.
Right,
no, I said that, I know, make sure. I have no problem, you know, he's a totally nice guy. I'm not nice. I'm not going to Sacramento to be nice. I'm going to raise a little hell and cause a little problems myself. Because too many times, people think, and Bob said something very interesting, so, well, the Supreme Court said something, so we've come up with this. They exacerbate a problem, and then they solve the problem by collecting and hoovering up massive amounts of money, giving them to the lovely folks at SEIU, and who then have pension issues. Wow. By the way, well, just because you said, wow. Well, yes, and other public sector employee unions. Thank you. I felt kind of wow about it too. And the fact is that we have a $200 to $300 billion unfunded pension liability. So we don't have a surplus at all. And the number one reason that I'm running here and now is because it's impossible to live here in the district where, and it's not traditional homeless. There are, of course, people who, have fallen on hard times. I've also lived paycheck to paycheck in my life. What we are seeing is huge amounts, and the cops on the street will tell you, not the administrators, but the cops on the street will tell you, they're spending 90% of their time dealing with people who are criminal vagrants. They were let out of jail wholesale. We made felonies into misdemeanors. They now are smoking meth or crack or whatever drugs, I don't really know the drugs, but they're blocking businesses' doorways so that you can't go into a place of business. Handicapped people, by the way, who would really benefit from some open sidewalks, can't get down a sidewalk. Our public transportation systems have become moving mental hospitals and bathrooms, and it is sad to me. I came from a third world country. I don't want to see this valley become a third world.
Assemblyman, would you like to comment, or should we go for some questions? Would you like to comment, Ms. Hoge?
I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, fair enough. Let's, sure, Mr. Cole,
go to the mic, people.
Oh yeah, I'm a sound guy.
Yeah.
Thank you both for being here. This is great. Adrin, just wanted to ask you a quick question. What legislation have you personally authored to address the mentally ill and the addicts that are in our street? Our quality of life here has changed dramatically because of the increase in these two elements.
Thank you. I can't remember the bill numbers, so my apologies. We vote on about 5,000 bills a year.
Not vote, but which you have authored.
Right. No, it's hard to even remember your own bill numbers. But if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 1457. It had to, and it was this year. I'm sorry, 2457. It was this year, and I was trying to work with the LA County Mental Health. I was working with the County Mental Health Department to try to figure out how we can free up funding from the federal government that's been left on the table for years, because we don't have a coordinated plan. Part of the problem with what we're dealing with everything having to do with addiction, to homelessness, to rehabilitation, to a consortium of issues that are intertwined, has to do with the lack of a plan, a strategic plan. We've never had one in place. This is going back to what I was saying before, that we're paying the price right now of decades not having a social safety net system. And we're building it up. And we're building it up by having the problem be in our face. So how do you do it? You're not going to be able to raise enough money to address it. It's going to take some time, and you're going to have to do it in a way that you're not wasting money, but building upon a plan that actually has results in success. And because we don't have a plan, we haven't had a plan, we're building one now, we don't have results to be able to base it on. That's the reality of what we're dealing with. So we can be upset about it, But I also wish that this frustration was being voiced 20 years ago.
Well, let's talk about now. I want to one quick question.
Quick questions and quick answers if possible.
Quick question is the reason I bring it up is a few weeks ago I was chased by somebody who was obviously not with a full deck, screaming at me, running across Whitsett, and I had to dive into the golf course because he was screaming and yelling that he was going to kill me. So I think this is a timely issue, needs to be addressed, and just.
If I could just address it
And
quickly.
I'm sorry that you had that experience. By the way, my bill was because there was a price tag to it, unfortunately, it got held in Appropriations Committee in my House. So I plan on working on it again and bringing it back.
On a local level, I'd love to see the council office CD2 actually send out emails instead of fluffy, everything is great, but address these two issues these are big hot button topics in our community.
Thank you,
and the
yeah.
council office has not addressed it.
They're not. And if I could just address it, I would say, wow, who's been in charge for those 20 years? It's on the tip of my, it's right here, it's right here. The fact is, however, that there's a huge bucket of money because we are Californians are warm-hearted people, and Adrin has the best of intentions, but HHH and H made a bucket of $2.5 billion. I actually wrote an article on affordability and housing, and it was published in the Daily News, which just endorsed me last week, the LA Daily News. So I've made copies for everybody, and on the back of that article is an amazing article called The $1 Billion Homelessness Scam. Because what happens is career politicians make problems, so they need to collect money to solve the problem so that they keep the problem going, so it's this horrible thing. And I'll remind you of a couple bills, Adrin, that you did sign on to. One is SB 1810, which no one put their name on, which made felony criminals eligible to divert their punishment because of a mental issue. What that means is if it's in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is what I was a psych major, what psychologists use to diagnose things. So depression, pedophilia, pyromania, those are all disorders in there. If you lit the building on fire because you're a pyromaniac, you get to go to therapy instead of going to jail. All these bills that come out of Sacramento have had the effect of rewarding crime. Basically, I have 4 kids. I know what happens. You get more of what you reward, right? And we've rewarded criminals for far too long.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
To the point that homelessness has been a problem for 40 years that has been mainly hidden and not out in the open, and also understanding that we have to address the issues that are happening right now. But what issues do you see right now that might be a bigger problem, like homelessness now, 10, 20, 40 years from now, that we can start working on now? Either one.
I'm happy to start. You're here coming up with a lot of solutions. So no, it's okay. It's all right. That's all right. When it's tough questions, we have to step up. So here's what's going on. Housing has been a failure. If you look at what we've invested in as housing stock, we used to develop about 210,000 roughly homes in California 20 years ago. Currently, we build about roughly 80,000, a little over 80,000 units of housing. Population growth has not gone down, it's gone up. So what that means is, as population goes up, housing stock goes down, we're artificially forcing the pricing to go up. So I disagree about housing. It is a significant issue, and it's a man-made issue. It's a societal issue.
Yes.
Whether it's because of, allow me to speak, and then you can ask your questions. Whether it's various jurisdictions coming up with difficult or challenging processes in order to not allow more density in an area, which in some cases, rightfully so, but in many cases might be a little out of touch with what the needs are. Because the very people who have moved into a certain area and did not want more development now can't find the opportunity for their kids who have grown up and want to live near them to be able to afford living by them. So these are careful balances that need to be weighed. But what we do is we overreact. We say, if you've done something wrong, you're going to go to prison. That's it. Instead of trying to rehabilitate. When we move into an area, we say no more development, and it stops. When we had the red car, we had a really great public transportation mechanism. We took it out, and because we were incentivizing individual car ownership and consumerism. That's what we've done to ourselves, and now we're trying to undo all of that and bring in a transportation mechanism. So the things that we need to work on, water. This is going to be LA-centric, because that's what I'm looking at.
No, it should be, yeah.
Transportation and water are the key to infrastructural components that if we don't pay attention to now, this will not be a sustainable area. Transportation cannot rely on just single occupancy vehicles. We need to have a system in place that allows greater rail, greater transit. SB 1, that I'm assuming most of the folks here were not happy with, and I do hope that you consider voting against against Proposition 6. But SB 1, the gas tax bill, invested in infrastructure, invested in our roadways and highways. But what individuals like me who represent these small areas in California, because you look at the 46th district, the density of it is such that it's a fingernail throughout California compared to other districts in California. You compare it to some of the District Number 1 or District Number 2. District 1 has 9 counties running through it. So that's a big area.
Assemblymember, may I interrupt as we get to some of the...
Yeah, yes. So can I
bring it to a close, because we have a lot of people lined up, that's all.
Thank you, but our needs are very significant and very challenging. We shouldn't be just relying on the same stretch of 10 miles of highways along 170, 405, and 101. We need to be looking at how we can build more rail so that more people can move around. 1. 2, we got to make sure that we're investing in our water infrastructure, because you saw what happened. We're still relying on infrastructure that was laid down by Mulholland over 115 years ago.
Okay, so I'll just answer really quickly. The biggest problem that's coming in 10 years, Venezuela. We will have the haves and the have-nots, and where I see the problem stemming from, everything is the fruit of the poison tree that was SB 54. When you have a policy of rewarding, again, illegality and felonious behavior, SB 54 is the sanctuary state law, and it's a misnomer. It wasn't just, it's not sanctuary like we're protecting moms taking their kids for getting ice cream. It was specifically, if you entered America illegally and then you committed a felony, this law was to protect you. So as a policy a thing that we have to look at, what's coming down the pike, huge public health issues, typhus, Hep A, all these things that are happening if we don't solve the problems. We're looking at basically escape from New York.
Thank you guys for coming.
Hi. I would like to ask you, given the fact that, well, we were talking about the thousands and thousands of prisoners have been released from our state prisons, right? And yet Jerry Brown just gave our prison guards, who are already the second highest paid in the country, a 5% raise that, of course, we can't afford. And you know, now they're the highest paid prison guards in the country. And given that we have the highest paid teachers, second highest paid teachers in the country for 9 months' work, and we're second and third from the bottom in test scores. So it seems to me that, you know, Sacramento basically is run and owned by the unions. They literally call the assembly their house. Yes. And so I would like to know how you can justify supporting the unions, the big money, which is a huge money in politics. 6 to 10 of the top 10 donors when Citizens United was passed were unions, not corporations. So I would like to ask you, with this horrible failure of public schools, how you can be against school choice, so the money goes to the parents instead of these failing schools, and like they have in Sweden and Canada and Chile and Spain and 29 countries in the world that clean our clocks academically.
So first of all, I've never voted against the interest of school children. So generic statements like that.
But what does that mean, against the interest?
I don't know what your question meant, so I'm just trying to paraphrase exactly what you said and say that I did not do that. But second, I didn't have a say in what the governor wanted to do. That was a decision that he had made. I supported what he's trying to do because
Paying the prison guards more?
Let me answer the question. Because there are, ma'am, have you toured a prison?
I actually have, yes.
Okay.
I have, yeah.
Okay.
I'm a writer, and I did a whole project
Okay.
on this. Yeah.
Well, if you've really gone to some of the prisons I visited and seen the circumstances, you've seen the needs, you've seen the challenges that many of our prison officers are working under and the constraints they're working under.
So we have worse criminals than they do everywhere else.
I think it's justified for them to get the pay that they deserve. They had not before this received a pay raise, if I'm not mistaken, since I think 2000, going back about a decade ago.
No, it wasn't that long ago. It was like 2012.
I think it was a decade ago.
No.
But anyway, our schools, if you look at on the aggregate, K through 12th education is about 46% of the state, and it's still
State
not
budget, right.
of the budget, and it's still not enough.
And we're second and third from the bottom in
Thank
test
you.
scores, and we've tripled our money.
And
we have a lot
it's
of
still not
questions,
enough,
so let's not
which
do
tells
follow-up
you-
questions.
Which tells you where we've made some decisions that have come back to haunt us. We passed Prop 13 back 40 years ago, and that has impacted us severely. You look at any pie chart or any graph, you will see a direct correlation in the drop of revenues and how it's impacted.
Absolutely not true.
We can't do
Absolutely. Can you
follow-up.
answer this, Roxanne? I'm sorry, that's just not true.
How?
We have
It's-
tripled our spending, and our tech scores have gone down. Tripled our spending. We have the highest spending in the world.
And what did we do with our population?
Let them go to the best schools their parents can get them into, like the middle class and upper middle class and rich people. They get to choose the best schools for their kids. But poor blacks and Hispanics especially get sentenced to the worst schools with the worst teachers in the country. The worst people.
I'll just jump in to say, because I know we're stuck for time, and I'll say that California does not actually have a revenue problem; it has a spending problem.
Yes.
And if our prisoners needed such high-class treatment, we could totally. They get to be incarcerated for a year at about a cost of $25,000 across the border in Nevada. We could give them an extra 10 and save about 40 right off the top. But the issues still remain that Sacramento is bought, wholly owned by unions. Union money is huge. Just look at the amounts being spent on each of the propositions and who's spending it. And I know that it's sad because our founders intended that regular people go run and come back. I was told you have no chance in hell unless you raise $100,000. We won't even talk to you, and that's from my own party. Right? That's what politics is. And with $25,000 raised, $25 and $100 a time from all of you, I was able to make a campaign video. You made a video just the other day.
I'm glad I
saw
came
it
to
was
your
good.
party. Thank you,
I know,
Roxanne.
I know, it was good. But the fact is that we no longer have people talking to people to get elected. You get a couple checks from CTA and the Nurses Association and you're good. Now, again, that's not to say that you personally are owned by them, but Sacramento is owned by them, and that's a shame.
Hello.
By the way, before you start, this is going to be the last question. I already had to take off, so I'm happy to answer it.
Fast, real
The
fast.
lightning round.
Okay, my father was a union member. He retired in 1987, by the way. We lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. My father helped the Jews, like clean up the facilities after the Jews. His payment to the unions was higher than our mortgage payment. We couldn't even afford to go to college. But that's not what I want to talk about. I used to work in downtown LA on Santa Fe. Used to be like if you start at Santa Fe, you go to the other end, you get a job. This is true. All those jobs are gone. They're in China. Oh, what are they doing there? Polluting. And then you can see the little fingers coming across the ocean. But this is the new religion, the global warming crap. It's religion. How can you say, like, we're sending our jobs, everybody's got an iPhone made by slaves, needless to say. I'm done. Thank you for
so
your
that was a
time.
comment. Okay, that was a comment. So an interrogatory, a short statement with an uplift at the end is a question. But we love you.
Here's the question. What are we doing to cut regulation? Cut regulations in education, because there is 46% of our budget that's going to education, and yet there's no accountability for those funds. And the reason why our educational system stinks is not because it's not being funded, it's because it's being, in a lot of ways, overfunded, and that money is either pigeonholed into specific places that it has to be spent when those schools don't actually need to spend that money. So if you're going to allocate that money, and I come from education, so I'm happy to discuss this, but if you're going to allocate that money, how are we going to make sure that it's responsibly spent?
So first of all, education is not being adequately funded. That's
it is.
Well, you asked, and I'm giving you an answer.
No, guys, he's on a schedule.
When you have teachers having to spend from their own paychecks to provide supplies for their students, no, it's not adequately funded.
You're not convincing me on this in any way, shape, or form.
Guys.
So that's one. Two, okay.
Regulations. How are you going to deal with that part of it?
LCFF took effect in 2014. That was a way of cutting down what had happened over the last
40 years while you're in power. Got it.
50,
Okay,
60
yep.
years. What had happened was various different categories were introduced. And the more categories were put into place for funding purposes to various school districts, all school districts were starting to hire or focus in on was more administration. We try to address it in the state by saying, well, administrative costs should only be 15% or less. We tried all these different things over the course of the last 30 years.
And none of them worked.
Nothing was working. So we looked at the local funding formula, and we instead changed it so that now you have, instead of 62 categoricals that you can apply for, whittled down to 12 categoricals. And these categories are either federal mandates or based on lawsuit that have to be followed, or Disability Acts related issues, again, falling in line with federal requirements. And those are the categoricals that you can apply for now. And we freed up a lot of money to be able to be spent back on librarians, counselors, nurses, all the other support system that we've lacked and that we needed, and which helped make our schools great.
And yet it's not being done.
And just very quickly, so
No,
this sort of
no.
just shows you what's wrong with school funding, and school functioning should happen locally.
Thank
it should
you.
not happen out of Sacramento. I know you have to go, and so I'm happy to stay and talk, whatever, but what you're doing is so important, and thank you for doing it.
Thank you.
I'm really glad that you came, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you,
Thank you both for
Assemblymember
coming.
Nazarian, for joining us.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you. We'll have opportunities for if you want to ask.
Okay, thank you.
Also, one question, and then we're going to introduce a few more candidates. Roxanne will stick around and come back, hopefully.
Okay, great. I want to ask sort of a get back to basics question. I've been studying the monetary powers and disabilities of our U.S. Constitution for about 10 to 15 years around there. It's a subject that's been looking at very, very heavily. The Article 1, Section 10 states that no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debt. It's a constitutional mandate. The dollar is used twice in the Constitution, and nobody knows what it is, except me. I went around Politicon asking everybody, and nobody seems to know what it is. It's a silver coin containing 371.25 grains of standard silver, codified in the Mint Act 1792, and it hasn't changed. So the question is, what is the state of California are you going to do to bring us back into a sane constitutional monetary policy?
Well, thank you for that. It's amazing that that you've spent that much time studying something so deep and arcane. I would say that there are things that actually are the purview of the federal government. And again, that's a problem that's in Sacramento, that people, I think that they get themselves confused with the federal government. However, what we need to do in Sacramento for all issues, and by the way, the complete upside down nature of our budget in Sacramento, whether or not it's based on gold or silver, the crash is coming because of the looming pension liability, unfunded stuff. But I'm sorry? That's honest, thank you. Keep going. Great, awesome. And so all that needs to stop. And the only way to have that happen is with balance. These guys who are lawyers, whereas Alfred is running for a judgeship, we have a criminal justice system, and you have prosecution and defense to get to the truth. In California, for too long, we've just had one side, and we're completely lopsided. I'm not saying we should live in a red state, but as a friend of mine said to me the other day, I've been wanting to live in a totally blue state my whole life, and now I do, and it is hell. We need balance so that people make sense. So as to monetary policy, California needs John Cox as governor because he's the only option. He's the only option to bring sanity to our budget.
Okay, thank you. So,
Because I'm a girl, I just started running for office this year. I'm like, this is my first rodeo, dude.
thank you, Roxanne. Great job. We'll hear from you again. Roxanne Hoge. And now we're going to hear briefly